Coming up next on the Big Fat Life podcast, the weight is history. Welcome to episode 119 of the Big Fat Life podcast here on the Pink Eagle Media Network. I'm your host, Dan Rosado. Thank you so much for joining me. So we took a break last week. It was the first break that I've taken in 118 weeks of doing this podcast, and it was much needed. I realized that pretty soon. So thank you for dealing with that. I hope you all enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. And now we're back into the swing of things, right? I don't know about you. Summer doesn't end for me when Labor Day comes. It did when I was in school, right? Like in my high school days and college days. Actually, in college, I was already going back to school in August. But I've no longer equated September and Labor Day weekend as the end of summer. I embrace summer pretty much until the calendar says it's over. So until September 21st, it's still summer to me. But I know that's not the case for everyone, especially if you're a teacher, just like our next guest. That's not why he's on the show today, although he does mention being a history teacher, and history was always my favorite subject. So we do have a little bit of a chat about that at the end. But he lost a lot of weight, and he did it through weight loss surgery. And as you'll hear, the first question I ask him is a question that a lot of people who haven't gone through a weight loss surgery ask, which is, why did you have to do surgery? Why didn't you just use willpower? And I asked it tongue in cheek to a point because I know the answer, but I wanted him to talk about it, and he was eager to talk about that. So without further ado, let's call up Rob. Rob D, welcome to the Big Fat Life podcast. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. It's actually 2 days before I go back to school for the first time in 18 months. I've had some medical tests that have shown that I have a leaky aortic valve, so my anxiety is completely through the roof, but I'm happy to say this is the best I've ever managed my stress and anxiety in 37 years. So, yeah, that's the opening I'm going to give you.
That's quite an opening. I have to ask you right away, what does a leaky aorta valve mean? Are you in any kind of danger, or are we okay?
So the good news is no. It's not 100% out of the woods, but essentially I was on vacation at the beginning of August, had an amazing week with the wife and kids, came home, was having ice cream on last day of vacation. All of a sudden felt chest pain, got rushed into the hospital, thought I was having a heart attack. They ran an EKG, stress test, a whole gauntlet of stuff, and found out that one of the aortic valves, where the blood goes away from the heart, doesn't close all the way, which causes a small bit of blood to kind of like trickle out. It's not 100% serious. It's something that within the next year, they have to run a whole bunch of tests, and it could lead through some medications that I'm on, or even getting replaced in the next year. But when I look at it, I'm standing up. Thank goodness I weigh, almost half of what I used to weigh and was able to handle this. So every day I'm here is a blessing, and I'm awesome and excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, I'm glad you're doing well then. I mean, anything with the heart is always a little scary. Yeah. Well, a lot scary. So I'm glad you're doing okay, and you're full of pep today, which is great. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't think it's going to be a hard question for you, but I do think it's a question that people ask when they come across any individual who's gotten weight loss surgery. And I think that if they don't ask it, they're thinking it. So the harsh way to ask the question, and I'm just want to preface,
because I get in the DMs all the time. So shoot your shot, yeah. Dan. We got this.
The harsh way to ask the question, because I think that really gets to the point, is why weight loss surgery? Why not just diet and exercise? Why did you have to go to these extremes? Why don't you have willpower?
I do. I just have it in all the wrong ways, and it's a great question, and it's a good thing about willpower. If it's diet and exercise, I've done that for 20 years and I've been unsuccessful with it. As a teacher, I always look with kids. If a kid didn't learn it the right way the first time, would you call that kid a failure?
No, they just were taught incorrectly.
How about the second time?
If they're being taught incorrectly, they're being taught incorrectly, right?
Exactly.
If the teacher is failing, the teacher is failing.
Yeah, and I'm not pointing the finger at the teacher, because as a teacher, I look at it as you got to try every single way possible to get across to a kid, and it took 27 different ways to get across to me of how I need to do this. With bariatric surgery, it was one of the most phenomenal experiences I ever went on, because it made me realize that it wasn't just diet and exercise, and it wasn't just that extreme. It was the fact that I had a lot of psychological things that was going on that I just never touched upon. I realized that I had binge eating issues. I realized through the therapy I had to go through to get the surgery even, that I use food and alcohol to handle any sort of emotional distress that my body faces. And from 10 years of being a Philly public school teacher, being an administrator, and everywhere else, I've seen a lot of stress. So it's one of those that, it came to me through a variety of different ways. I mean, I've tried everything. You name any medication, I've gone through it. You've tried every exercise, diet plan, I've tried it. And I finally found one that worked, and it was through, VSG surgery.
Yeah. What was your experience? Like, were you always dealing with weight issues your entire life, even as a child?
So I always like to joke that I had a very good childhood. I was a little bit of a hefty kid, but I was also, growing up in an Italian family where food is everything. Food is comfort. Food is joy. Food is there for mourning. You do well in school. You get good food. Someone dies. You're surrounded by food. And there was a lot of emotional shaping from my upbringing when it came to around food. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was not, I can't sit there and tell you like, oh, my mom and dad force fed me or my grandma force fed me, but food was always around in our house. And that was a blessing, especially for so many who don't have that. But it was one of those of, second and third plates were normal growing up. And when I was younger, I was able to exercise and play sports, and I could burn off all those extra calories. But as I got into college and I stopped playing less and eating more, the weight just kept coming on until one day you kind of blink and you're like, wow, I'm 300 pounds and I got to do something. And then you're 365 pounds and you're like, this is really getting scary.
Yeah, no, it is scary. And the thing is that I'm not alone in this opinion. I know that for a fact, but we're learning so much about obesity, about people dealing with weight issues, and learning that, to the question that I asked initially, that the thinking that why don't you have the willpower is to a large extent wrong thinking, because obesity is an illness. It is a problem that so many people deal with, and it can't be coincidence. That's where I look at this and I say, when so many people have this issue, are we talking about willpower? Are millions of people dealing with a willpower issue? Or are they dealing with, in some cases, nutritional misguidance? And even if that's the case, why are we using food as a crutch? Why are we using food to self-medicate? And that seems to be where then we are talking about illness. And it's not always mental illness, although it's a huge part of this.
Absolutely.
You're using food to cope. But I also think we're talking about what is out there, what is nutritionally available that we're putting in our bodies that is causing this problem. Why do we constantly feel hungry? Why do we feel like we need to turn to the wrong things? How did your experience with the psychological help that you received as well in going through this surgery, how has that transformed your thinking about food? Because obviously physically you changed. Physically you ate less. Right. There's those muscles. So physically, yeah, you changed your how much you could consume. And then as a result, the weight loss happened. But what happened mentally for you that you were able to carry this out beyond a weight loss surgery, which is the most important part?
So let's go back to that whole idea of sickness and illness, and let's focus on there first. If you busted your shoulder up, could you imagine if everyone in society just outright went to you and said, Dan, why aren't you just doing more shoulder presses? Why don't you just lift your shoulder more? Come on, man, you have a shoulder. Everyone's got a shoulder. Just lift your shoulder. And that's the problem around a lot of the psychological things with obesity is our friends, family members, and society will come at you initially and just like, well, why don't you just diet and exercise more? And no one wakes up and says, you know what? I want to be 365 pounds. Nobody wakes up and says, you know what? I want to special order my pants on the internet because I can't find them in the store. No one says, I want to spend $600 a month on fast food on top of just eating my regular 3 meals a day so people don't see how much I eat. Nobody does that. So it's one of those things that, from a psychological standpoint, you had to change the whole mentality of how are you going to approach it? How are you going to tackle it? And I had to come from a place of positivity and a place of data. One of the best things that I started to do to really help with my mentality was to stop looking at food as this emotional connection and to really look at it as just straight up data. That donut is the coffee roll I have. Yes, I enjoy a coffee roll, and it is still my treat that I have every Friday if I've tracked the entire week that well. But in another sense, from data, I have to look at it as that's 180 calories right off the bat, or 280 calories, depending on where you get it from. And once you really start looking at the numbers, it really does take the emotional part of eating and remove it and let you focus on the data. And when I was at my biggest, the two biggest data pieces that really opened my eyes to the highest was after I started the whole process to get the surgery, the doctors wanted me to track my calories. I was eating anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 calories a day. And that was one where when I looked at it from that sense, 8,000 calories a day is ridiculous. That's 4 times the amount that the average person eats. And right now, to give you an idea, an average walking around day for me, I am sitting anywhere from 1,700 to 1,900 calories. And that's what's still working out. So that's 8,000 calories a day where I'm sitting. I am not working out. I am not tracking my steps. The other point was right during the beginning of the pandemic, we started doing Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. Shout out to Dave. But it was one of those that I started tracking my money. And I was realizing that every morning I would do this whole hustle in my head of, okay, I'm going to go get coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. Well, if I'm at Dunkin' Donuts, I might as well get a coffee roll too. Well, coffee roll really isn't breakfast. So let me go to Taco Bell. I like Taco Bell's breakfast. Let me get a bacon breakfast crunch wrap with that. Okay, so now I've had 750 calories after the breakfast I've had at my house, but before I even set in and start work at the door. And then on the drive home, it would be pizza, Burger King, any fast food imaginable. Looking after a month of tracking that, I was spending $600 a month on fast food, just me eating in between work and commuting each month. So one of the things I did to start to really remove that psychological aspect is every time I beat a craving, and I beat a binge, I would call it, I would take $10, I'd withdraw it out of the bank, and I would put it into a piggy bank. And after a month, I had enough money to buy a treadmill. And then the month after that, I bought flooring for my house. Then the month after that, I bought Bowflex dumbbells. And then the month after that, I had a home gym. All from just, instead of investing in Burger King, investing into myself.
That's amazing. That's an amazing way to look at this, because you're I mean, in real dollars and cents.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, and tell me how you feel about this, but I think when people are going through this process and trying to find out what is the way that I can crack the code, so to speak, and learn the right way to do this, is to apply it to something that matters to you. And unfortunately, sometimes our health isn't the thing that we put first and foremost. So sometimes it takes those other things, like, not only am I getting healthy, but I'm saving all this money, and I can use this money for so many other.
I bought a home gym off of Cheesy Gordita Crunchy. You think about it that way. Like this gym is brought to you by Taco Bell and Burger King. It's a phenomenal thing. And a part of it I have to shout her out is my wife was so phenomenal. Part of the reason we started to do Financial Peace is we both work amazing jobs. We both make very good money. And we were just wondering, where is all the money going? We don't have that BMW. We don't live in that mansion. And it was disheartening. I was heartbroken having to go to my wife after tracking for a full month and say, honey, I'm spending $600 to $700 a month on food. And she's like, we're eating dinner every night. We're not even eating out that often. Like, that's a whole separate amount. We were spending another $1,500 in fast casual. So literally close to $2,000 a month straight up just from not making right food choices. And she was supportive of that. She never judged me for that. She really saw it as, we just need to get you help, and we need to make better choices as a family. And we've essentially cut both of those budgets out of our entire life. And that's how we paid for our vacations this year.
And this all happened after you had the surgery,
This
correct? Like
started
looking
right
at post.
before. So we hit a fun point. So the pandemic happened and we started Financial Peace, but I had already started the psychological tracking and doing everything for this class. So we hit this odd point where we didn't know if I was even going to be able to get the surgery because literally the world shut down. So we're taking these courses and we're like, look, we don't know what's going to happen job-wise. We don't know money-wise how it's going to happen. Let's go into super safe and let's just really start saving and cranking everything out. And slowly and surely, from March to June, we were able to save all this money. And then they were able to schedule my surgery in June. And I think one of the reasons I was so successful in the surgery was I had done so much psychological preparation into this surgery that I had just never worked on before. Every other time I worked out, I never connected the psychological aspect of what was going on with my life and why I was eating so much.
So here's the question. You know these things.
Yes.
You're looking at the monetary value of it. You're looking at the psychological value of it. You're looking at what the food is doing to you physically. All those things. It's you're writing it. You're looking at the data, as you mentioned. How do you then fight off the craving? Craving is different, right? The data is telling you one thing, and you're like, I'm going to stick to that data. I'm not spending that money. But darn it, if I don't want that donut or that slice of pizza,
I still want that.
or
yeah. So I guarantee I want that too, Dan. And that's the problem. So there's this whole stigma we have of weight loss surgery. And it's because I think a lot of people post in the first 3 months of, hey, I have absolutely no appetite anymore. And I eat half a Triscuit and I'm full, even though you shouldn't have a Triscuit 1 month post-op. Do not take that as medical advice, people. You need to get your protein and listen to your doctor. But you eat so little that you assume, oh, I'm never going to be hungry again. And then somewhere around the 9 months, your body starts creating ghrelin again, which essentially is what causes your hunger to come back. And all of a sudden you're like, I haven't had cheesy gordita crunch in a minute, but that sure does sound good. And then you eat a bit of it and you realize like, oh, I can still eat this. And that's a part where I had to hit this whole new level of working on psychologically with me is this idea of where do my binges come from and what still causes these cravings. And a lot of the reason that I still had cravings or that I wasn't managing my cravings well was because I was going to a restrictive approach. So it was the whole idea of, hey, I'm never having a donut again. And the problem is, if I told you, don't picture a pink elephant, what's the first thing that's coming into your mind, Dan?
I already did. I already pictured it.
Now, I will tell you the example that, my psychologist gave me, shout out to Dr. Banford, but it was much more graphic than a pink elephant. So anyway, going there. So the first thing you do is your head's giving this like warning light. All you're thinking about is that. So one of the things I worked with my doctor with is to do advanced tracking. And the idea was, okay, I still want a coffee roll. And I can still have a coffee roll. I can't have 6 coffee rolls. I can't have a coffee roll every day. But if I track every day healthy and clean and I work it into my macros, maybe Friday I do have a coffee roll. Or it's, hey, I have pizza every Friday because that's what my family does and pizza is delicious. So maybe the coffee roll comes Saturday morning and you work it into the macros that way. And it started by making sure that I have every single meal planned out for the week, the month, and I have a sign somewhere down here that, of course, I can't find this second. But it pretty much says all my meals are tracked for the day. And it's one of those things. Here we go. So this is right by my office desk every day. And that just says my meals and snacks are tracked for today. So one of the problems we have when we have these cravings is some part of our brain hasn't mentally worked out you're getting food. So when your body says it's hungry, your body is screaming, I'm hungry. I want whatever I can think of or whatever I can see. For me, psychologically, it's, okay, I know I'm having a protein shake at 7 o'clock in the morning. All right, I know that at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm having 6 tablespoons of liquid egg white and 5 ounces of chicken thigh as my breakfast. okay, I know that lunch is 4 ounces of salmon and a quarter cup of chickpea salad and a quarter cup of vegetables. And by knowing what the next meal is, it keeps me from saying, no, I don't need that donut, or no, I don't need that pizza, or pizza comes on Friday, donut comes on Saturday, and it allows that to come in. And because I know where the food's coming from and I have a plan, it keeps me on point.
So that preparation, we're not just talking about, because normally whenever I hear about meal prepping, I'm thinking about the physical aspect of this. You plan ahead, you make less quote unquote mistakes, and you're going to lose the weight because you've tracked for all of it. But this is actually making a mental roadmap of how you're going to go through your week so that the alarms don't go off. I'm starving. Give me whatever's easiest to eat, which is usually the things that, create the biggest problems.
I'm going to do one better for you because I'm a teacher. Everything I have is in Google Calendar, and I map out my dinners by the month. And the reason I do that is, don't get me wrong, I'm not making them all like September 1st and then taking them out of the freezer. I have mapped out about 60 healthy meal options for dinner that I love and that my family loves. And each summer we call it like, this is lab session, where we literally try new dishes. We try to make them healthy. We get the macro count to everything. And then essentially what we do is we know, okay, we're going to have 4 pork nights in a month. So this is where we're having jalapeno smothered pork chops one night. We're going to do teriyaki pork chops the following week. The week after that, it might be grilled with sugar-free barbecue sauce. And that 4th night might be a pork tenderloin that we just marinate in some vinaigrette dressing. So you're still getting pork, you're still getting it 4 times a month, but you're not playing out the same meals. And I think that's the big mistake people have when they think of meal prep is, oh, I'm having the exact same meal every day. And yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it either if I was eating the same thing. My family knows that even if they don't like a meal, that's the only time they're going to have it, that once a month. So even when this might, my youngest daughter, Stella, she loves shrimp. My oldest daughter, Allie, she hates shrimp. But Allie knows there's only 4 shrimp meals that she has to eat every month. And she kind of likes shrimp stir fry. So she knows, okay, now there's only 3 meals I kind of don't like. And by doing that, the whole family has a variety of food. I'm eating healthy and on point. And I have an exact idea of what am I putting in the grocery list each week so that I'm not going out and buying everything left and right.
Yeah, it seems like a really smart way to go about it, because you're right. That's one of the biggest issues is, how do I do meal prepping and not get bored of what I'm eating?
Yeah.
Which I don't know if this is a new idea, but for me, this is the first time I've ever heard it broken down this way, that, hey, I'm going to have it all planned on a calendar and I know where I can pick from.
Yeah.
It seems like a really smart way to do this.
And it's good. We have a rule of thumb, 3 out of 4 family members have to like a meal for it to stay in rotation. If it drops to 2, then the 2 really have to like it as a special meal. But if everyone enjoys eating the healthy meal, it's no longer looked at as I'm eating a healthy meal. It's I'm having dinner with the family. And it's played a big role, and that saves time on, I'm not running last minute to get groceries to make something happen. I'm not saying, oh, we forgot to get this for the item. And by keeping some staple pantry items too, it's just saving time, money, and effort when you do everything.
I imagine that this wasn't always easy. Like, It took practice to get to this point.
Yes. Yeah.
And to incorporate your family in that as well adds a whole, more levels of difficulty, I guess, before you get the support.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, my wife she has a very specific palate. There's just food she likes, there's food she doesn't like. So one of the things that I wasn't going to do through this weight loss journey was I wasn't going to make 4 different meals. So it was one of those things of, if you had to power rank who has to approve of each meal, it's me. My wife, it's got to pass me first, or else I'm not giving it to the other 3 members. But then my wife really has to like it. And my wife is so good. She will try every meal I make at least once. And she's very good of, look, I like this part of the meal. I don't like this part of the meal, or I don't like this meal at all. And if she doesn't like that meal at all, it doesn't mean that it wasn't a failure. It just meant, okay, that meal didn't work. Let's go back to being a teacher. Let's find another one. And we retool. Well, what didn't you like about it? Okay, let's adjust that. And, when you do that work all through your summertime, we're in September, we're in back to school. My daughters are starting dance and field hockey. They just got done swimming. Karate starting up. My wife's going to be coaching while still being an administrator for a big fancy job. And, I have a job too, so I have to teach. So to balance all those things out, you have to have your plan going into September ready, and we have staple meals to go through. We know that each one of our kids and family members is getting a special meal this week because it's back to school to make their transition in more comfortable, but that they're also having a healthy option every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that they like and want.
Yeah. Did you experience, after the surgery, did you experience weight loss pretty immediate, or does it take some time to start noticing?
So yes to both. It was one of those things that when I started the process, it was August of the year before. I went into my pulmonologist, and he was like, Rob, I see you once a year. Every year you're 30 pounds heavier. And I'm like, uh-huh. And he's like, you're burning out your CPAP machine. I'm like, uh-huh. And he's like, you can't burn out this CPAP machine. I'm like, oh, we'll just get a bigger CPAP machine. He's like, no, you don't understand. You're the big boy. You're at the biggest model. They don't make it. It sounds like a motorboat every time you set off, to just keep you breathing at night. And I'm like, okay, so what happens next? I was so oblivious to this. They go, look, you're essentially going to go to sleep and you're not going to wake up. And I'm like, oh, you mean like when I'm 60? They're like, no, like any day. So it was one of those where my sleep apnea had gotten so bad that I needed to make a change fast. And that's when I started tracking my food. I started really looking into weight loss surgery. And they said, look, you got to do all this work to get through it. I ended up losing about 50 pounds. I went from 365 when I started the process down to about 315 when I went under the knife for surgery. So I lost the first 50 on my own, and then I've lost the next 100 through the surgery. So
at any point, did anyone around you, your doctor, say, hey, you've lost 50 pounds so far?
Absolutely.
Why don't you keep going?
Absolutely.
And what was your conclusion to that thinking?
So Dan, I got to tell you, the drive of everything I do is I love my wife and kids. I don't want to imagine me abandoning them because of my stupid choices. And I've lost weight before. I could write a book on here's every way I've lost weight. Keto, done that. Weight Watchers, done that. Fentanyl, done that. I can go through the entire laundry list, every single way I've lost weight. And the problem is I just yo-yo where if I lose 40, I gain 60. I lose 60, I gain 80. And it would just keep spiking and roller coastering up that I said, you know what? I'm making sure I take every advantage possible so I have the most success possible. And what fuels me every day is I want to make sure I am the healthiest I can be for my wife and kids.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good a motivation as any, right?
Yes.
If not just to keep living this life. So
also, I didn't answer that question at all. Essentially, everyone asked me when I lost the 50 pounds, and that was essentially it. I said, no, I'm going to keep going with it.
Right. No, I figured. And it's just, to ask that question is I guess it's the elephant in the room if you want to ask it, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you start to succeed on your own, and then it starts to be like, maybe you don't need invasive stuff. Maybe you don't need surgery. And I think ultimately that's a personal decision all around. And for you, putting your wife and kids first, it's like, I don't want to waste any more time at this. And the experience that so many of us have had with the yo-yo up and down, it's like, if you continue to yo-yo, you haven't figured this out yet.
Exactly.
That's not to say that it's not worth trying. And that's not to say that it's a total failure. I think failing is giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And for people, myself included, it's a constant trying to learn and figure out. I mean, I've been doing this podcast over 2 years, and I hear a lot of different opinions and a lot of different situations where I've seen the successes. And the only thing I've learned is that there's no one rule for anyone. No. It seems, maybe too much sugar. That seems to be a universal rule.
Sometimes too much sugar is bad all around. I haven't seen anyone who's coming in with the Reese Cup diet, but if they make it, I would have tried it. I would have been on that like yesterday.
Listen, Rob, I was waiting for someone to come out with the pizza diet. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for someone to say, I eat 4 slices of pizza a day and I've lost. I'm like, let's do it. Never happened.
That would probably be my only regret, because they always ask, do you have any regrets of weight loss surgery? I'm like, if they figure out a way for me to eat pizza and lose weight tomorrow, I'm going to be super pissed at this whole process. But other than, it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Because now I have like one slice of pizza and I'm like, I want more pizza, but I can't physically fit pizza. And I don't even know if I want the pizza tomorrow. And I just sit and I look at pizza very sadly, because my kids are eating like 2 slices. And they're like, you don't want any more? I'm like, I want all of this pizza. And I've had all of this pizza. So,
right. So is it ever weird to you, or I don't know if weird's the right word, but it's just got to be a different experience now when you do have the pizza and you find that you can eat just, whatever allotted amount you give yourself, versus in the past where you remember, I would have eaten that whole pie, or I would have eaten.
Absolutely. Yeah. The delivery guy thought like I probably got a divorce, because what the order used to look like and then what it looks like now are two different meals. Because, I used to joke I could justify any decision I made as a father, a husband, or a 365-pound man. So it's one of those like, well, it's Pizza Friday. Well, I like sausage and onion on my pizza, so we need a sausage and onion pizza. Well, my youngest daughter doesn't really like sausage and onion, so she needs cheese pizza. So let's get 2 pizzas. Well, what's good in pizza? Cheesesteaks, because I live in Philly. So why don't we get a cheesesteak and we'll split it between the family? And really, they're going to take like 2 bites and I'm going to eat the cheesesteak. Well, if you're having a cheesesteak, you got to have cheese fries. So let's get cheese fries. Oh, look, if I spend $4 more, I get 4 liters of soda for free, even though they're like a nickel if you go to the store. Well, look at that. I now have spent $80. I have 3 pizzas, a cheesesteak, cheese fries, and 4 liters of soda. And now it's like we order just 1 pizza for our family and we're happy at the end of the night. And we're all okay with that. And it's a totally different world.
Yeah, I imagine that your family has benefited from your food choices now, since you eat as a family.
They don't get as much fun things, I will say that. So, but I will say it's been nice. My oldest daughter loves to cook, and one of the things I'm proudest of is she's in the kitchen with me. She's measuring out olive oil and putting it into the pan. She figured out how to make a healthy egg white omelet this summer for herself, where she uses that, turkey bacon, and a little bit of mozzarella cheese, and she makes her own omelet. And she's 9. Right. And, knowing that I'm teaching my kids how to cook healthy and live healthy has just been really rewarding.
Do you think you were on track to potentially die if you wouldn't have changed something?
Absolutely. I think we saw that this summer. I'd be lying to you, Dan. The scariest part of this summer when I had the chest pain and had to go into the ER wasn't that I was in the ER for chest pain. All I could think of is, where would I be right now if I was 365 pounds? Where would I have been if I didn't spend the last 18 months reducing my fat, tracking my calories, working out every day, making a diet and meal plan that worked? Where would I be? And I fear what that answer would have been. So it's one of those of, I look at every day that you get to see me, the chance that I get to talk to you or people in this community. Every day is a blessing. Every day you talk to me, this is a chance I get that I might not have had even at the end of this month. So right. It's one of those, I look at it like every day I live, that's the money in the couch cushion.
You mentioned a few times about your macros, and you've also mentioned a couple times in your diet, you mentioned egg whites. I wonder, do you make those choices purely on macros? So if you say, I'm going to go with the egg whites instead of the egg, right? There's a lot of literature to support that egg yolks can be, quote unquote, good for you, or maybe bad for you. We don't know. Everyone has a different experience. When you make those type of choices, what is important for your macros to sustain the weight loss that you've had and your health as well?
So I'm gonna go on a tangent real quick. And do you know the comedian Louis Black?
Yes, of course.
So my favorite Louis Black sketch of all time when it comes to health is, he's like, if you want to know how screwed up America is, we haven't figured out an egg in 100 years. Is it good? Is it bad? Well, the yolks are bad. The yolk is good. Now we need to add more yolk. Now we need no yolk. We got to go to the egg boy. And he flips out and screams. And we still don't know. I was super lucky, and this is where it gets even crazier. I went for my 1-year bariatric appointment, and they were so proud of my work. They were like, the one thing that looked high was I had a little bit of an elevated cholesterol. And I didn't even have bad cholesterol before everything happened. So I was like, oh my goodness, like, let's get this in. I started working with my nutritionist, and I was starting to work with my coach, Jim Lohr, who's a bariatric patient of 4 years. And he started to say, like, look, just honestly track everything and let's make tweaks. And he was like, well, if we want to start reducing fat out of your schedule, the yolk is where you get some of the fat. And instead of doing bacon in the morning, do a chicken thigh. So it gives you a little bit more protein while still reducing the fat. So we spent almost the entire summer reducing fat throughout, just from saying, hey, here's what I do, this is what I like. And he was giving quick swaps like that of, well, why don't you just switch this and go from that? And then I had massive chest pain at the end of the summer. So good job for me.
Did your cholesterol go down?
No, it doubled. That was the worst part. So I spend the entire summer working on this. I go in for chest pain. They do the blood work. They're like, your cholesterol level doubled. What have you been doing all summer? And I tell them I'm eating 60 grams of fat a day. And this is half the reason I have to still go back and do all the tests and do everything is I guess the only thing they can say is your blood cells essentially store X amount of cholesterol in your body. And what had probably happened is they had released old cholesterol that was stored in my blood cells because my body's craving it and releasing it. So I got way too healthy, way too fast, I guess was the problem.
And that's another thing, just like the egg, we haven't figured out the egg. I don't think we've figured out cholesterol either. It seems that whether or not cholesterol is even bad, and obviously in medicine, doctors, that's a marker that they have to look at for heart disease. But then there's a lot of question of, is that the only marker for heart disease? So exactly. Is an elevated cholesterol bad if you've reduced the inflammation in your body? There's so much, what the bottom line is though? That you do the best you can to make yourself as healthy. And if you feel good, that's probably a good indicator that you're doing the right thing. You seem to feel good. Exercise. Let's talk about that. That's a big part. I mean, you by cutting out the fast food, you now have a home gym. Working out. How big is that in your life now?
Well, we're going to find out because I'm going back to full-time teaching after 18 months of remote, hybrid, and everything else. So a part of me is freaking out of how am I going to fit all this into my schedule while balancing my kids' schedule, while balancing meal prepping and doing everything else. And one of the main focuses that I'm going through in September is I'm really going back to the mantra in my head of you cannot outwork a caloric surplus. Right. And the idea that I'm getting super serious and super lean on tracking all of my calories, making sure that I'm putting the right things into my body so I don't have to do these incredibly long workouts. One thing that I negotiated with myself is I was going to do 15,000 steps a day. It comes to a little bit over 8 miles a day doing 15,000 steps. And I hit it for 215 days in a row. Day 216, I missed it by 4 by accident. So I'm back on about day 105 right now. I'm not bitter about that at all. I am not bitter about that at all. No matter how many times I say it, I am not bitter about that at all. But no, it's one of those of I make sure that I'm running around my classroom. I specifically asked my principal, can I have lunch and cafeteria duty? So I'm moving around there. It's working movement in throughout your entire day. And then I'm using stuff like the Peloton to get 20 minutes of high intense lifting. And I do yoga 3 times a week. So I had my whole summer Rocky training montage. I'm going to a little bit of a less schedule, but as important as it is, if I'm telling anyone, you cannot outwork a caloric surplus. And that's no matter what, they haven't found an exercise routine that will do that.
Right. Yeah. That's where, I've heard a few different things about, exercise doesn't really do that much for weight loss. And I think the reason that people say that, because I've seen research even on that, and it's because there's a lot of other factors. And the biggest factor is it's not going to do anything for weight loss if you're in a caloric surplus, as you said. Like it's not going to work that way. And I also think it's an unhealthy way to approach eating and exercise if you're thinking your exercise is going to somehow negate the choices that you just made in that day for food. I think it's an unhealthy relationship with that.
And let's go back to the psychological aspect of that is there is a problem of when you connect working out with unhealthy food choices, you start to build this nasty relationship of, oh, I just had, like Taco Bell breakfast, or I just had, a plate of pancakes. Well, I guess that means I'm doing burpees till I vomit, or even I'm just working out insanely for 2 hours. And you start to have this whole bad relationship of if A, then B. And once that symbiotic relationship gets too connected, it then becomes that working out is punishment. And I take a routine of, once I stop liking something in my workout routine, I stop it for 2 weeks. So there was a point I felt yoga was becoming a chore. I took 2 weeks off, and then all of a sudden by like day 10, I'm like, no, I need to stretch. I need to get my body moving. I went back to it. But if I kept doing it without loving it, I would have burned myself out. And I've done that on so many workouts before, just burning myself out on doing something to the point that I never want to do it again.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it's something that a lot of us have dealt with and we've tried to figure out, is the idea that, I'm punishing myself through exercise, and you realize that that's never going to be sustainable. So how do you figure that out? And I think one of the ways is find the exercise that you do enjoy, lean into those, and that can always change, as you said.
Yeah.
The yoga worked, and then I don't want to do yoga, so then don't do yoga.
Plus, I'm Catholic. I carry enough guilt on every other part of my life. Right now, I'm sure I'm doing something wrong somewhere under God's eye. So, I don't need any more added of my food now is making me go on the treadmill for another 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Rob, as a man in the weight loss community, I think sometimes, although there's more of it now, but you don't hear the guy perspective as often. And I know that matters to you. You do on your Instagram account, which we'll talk about in a moment, but on your Instagram, you do this Men's Support Monday.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, why that's important to you and what you are hoping to achieve with that?
So this is the coolest thing ever. Sleeved Athlete on Instagram, my boy David, he put a post once up of just shout out to all the men in the weight loss community. There's like 6 of us, and just know you're keeping us up. And I liked it, and I was like, hey, everyone in the comment section, drop who we should know. And I didn't realize how many people there were, but how no one's like, it's not out there. Like, if you look in the weight loss community, the women do a phenomenal job of supporting themselves, getting each other out. And it was one of those things that when I look at support groups, there's some great ones out there, but they really don't touch upon the men's perspective. Like, I don't need to sit in a 45-minute Zoom call to learn how to make a Frappuccino with 45 calories less. I'm never going to drink a Frappuccino in my life. Shout out to the people who do, but that's just not my bag. So it started as, why don't we just host this thing? And I asked a couple people who I really looked at in the community. Ked Sleeves Believe the Hype came on. Gourmet Goes Keto did one. Dan, I'd love to have you come through when you're ready. I'm putting you on the spot. Yes. And you said you're not stopping recording, so we'll schedule this after. But it's one of those of what I was so proud of the men in this weight loss community is it was like Field of Dreams. Once I had the first one, all of a sudden there was 10 to 15 people. Hey, I really want to talk about this perspective of what it's like. Fat Bear to Finish Bear did an amazing job of, I want to talk about how my upbringing of growing up with food not being available in our house caused my weight gain and how I've combated against that. Black Rob wanted to talk about the perspective for African-American men to come on. And it's been that we've gotten so many people who want to come out and give, here's the tricks that help the men in our community, that it's been phenomenal. So, tune in 9 o'clock Eastern time for everyone who wants to come on.
Yeah, and why don't you let everybody know what your Instagram handle is in case they don't know, so they can follow you and actually be able to do that?
It's My Weight is History, underscores in between each one of those. And that's because I'm a history teacher by trade. So, my goal is to make it history. It's something about the past. And just like a good history teacher, I like us to learn from our past so that we can celebrate and make ourselves a better future.
I could agree with that more. As a former history honors student, my favorite subject with all my years in school. That's awesome. This is my first time learning you're a history teacher.
Yeah.
So I'm smiling because it just immediately clicks where I'm like, oh, that's great. I agree with that. I think, when I was in high school and in college, I would always hear moans and groans, oh, history, it's so boring. And I'm like, how is this boring? because we're telling a story, right? And from that story, and I guess it's all about how people connect to things. But to your point, learning from your history it can only help you as you propel forward in life, because life is hard.
Yeah.
It can be easy sometimes, but it is hard. There's choices every day you have to make. How do you know to make those right choices? And looking at your personal history and seeing what you've gone through, it's clear that you've made the right decisions for yourself and your family. And we're really happy that you're healthy and feeling good moving forward.
Yeah, and Dan, I look at it going back to being a history teacher. It's the reason I love your podcast and why I listen to other podcasts. I'm not the first man to get to 365 pounds, and I'm not going to be the last one. But, you know, when I go on my walks, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to the other podcasts in the weight loss community, because it both inspires me, but it shows me it's been done before. And if I pick up just one or two tidbits, if someone listening today just gets one or two things out of this podcast, we're doing our job as history tellers of taking a bad experience in our lives and using it to help others. So I love what you're doing. I love that we are doing storytelling. So podcasts have a near and dear place in my heart, but you are on my walk. So that's why I'm always posting. This is what I'm listening to, guys, when I'm walking, doing laundry, meal prepping. Fill your ears with things that will inspire you to get better.
I think that's the best advice for anyone who's listening. And I appreciate your support as well, Rob, and all that you do for the community. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks again for having me, Dan.
Well, we're really happy that Rob has his heart condition under control. That's really scary when you hear about anything happening with the heart, but he's got doctors on it and he's getting monitored. Hopefully he won't have to have surgery. And if he does, we wish him a speedy recovery. I love talking to guys like Rob. To me, it's familiar to the Northeast. I don't know, maybe there's other parts of the country that also do this, but the loudness, talking over each other, the excitement in the conversation, that kind of stuff, you get energized as you're talking. And, you know, one of the important things that Rob brought up, and we didn't even define it this way, but we've defined it on the show so many times, is understanding your why. And his why was his family, his wife and his kids. The idea of leaving them early because of poor choices that he made. He needed to do something, and he took maybe to some extreme action, but he got the surgery and he's been healthy ever since. That's the key with weight loss surgery, or even if you just do natural, quote unquote, natural weight loss. It's about how you follow through after the fact, because you could always go backwards and you could always just stay unhealthy and not change your habits. And he did the mental work. He continues to do that. That's an ongoing thing. It never ends. Whether you're dealing with something like depression or anxiety, or if you're dealing with addictive personalities, and in this case with food, and you realize you're binging to cope, those things need to be sorted out. And which is why sometimes very restrictive diets don't work. You have to, work on your diet, of course, and change your habits. I mean, in Rob's case, he cut his calories severely because he was having so many calories in a day, more than anyone really should, more than some athletes should. But in doing that, in restricting himself, he had to relearn how to fuel himself. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of practice, more than any weight loss surgery would do. He's doing that, and I commend him for that. And that's something we definitely can learn from him. Don't forget, if you'd like to watch a video version of this episode, you can just go to YouTube, type in Big Fat Life Podcast, subscribe to the channel, and you'll see this episode. You'll see our conversation as well as other conversations. We're going to keep on loading those up as we go on through the weeks. Thank you once again for tuning into the show. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you are allowed to leave a rating and review, so feel free to do so, as we appreciate the feedback. If you listen somewhere else and you want to let us know how you feel, you can reach us on Instagram and Facebook at Big Fat Life Podcast, and on Twitter, we're Big Fat Life Pod. As always, I thank you for allowing me to share my journey and the story of so many others. Remember, it's a long journey, it's a big fat journey, but one we can reach as long as we stay the course and stay strong. Music in the show, You Can't Fail by Destiny and Time. Our theme song is Clear Eyes by Silent Partner. Our amazing producer is my awesome wife, Alyssa Rosado. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week.